Now that you have read or listened to Act 2, Part 2, we are now going to go through the scene in a little bit more detail, and I'll guide you through some observations that I've made to help you with your own annotations. Okay, so I'm only going to make a few comments, and I've highlighted these in pink. These are the main things I'm going to be talking about, just so that I don't go for too long and ramble on about things. I'm just going to restrict myself to these things, and you can make annotations about the things that I haven't commented about. So here we have this part where John Proctor is attempting to recite the Ten Commandments, and this indicates to us a sort of a test of that Hale is performing, and we talked previously about how this is a way that people demonstrated their faith as how well they knew the Bible, and in most cases it was more about how well they remembered things that were told to them, because remember, a lot of these people wouldn't have been able to read the Bible themselves. They would have learnt it from hearing people speak the word to them. And this comment here with Hale, where he says, "Theology, sir, is a fortress. No crack in a fortress may be accounted small." Here we are seeing the power of the church in this community and the perception of religion at this time. And it's very much this attitude of either you're with us or you're against us. That's the attitude. And it really encourages the persecution of anyone who, I guess, deviates from accepted Christian behaviour. One misstep can derail a reputation completely. Therefore, everyone is eager to conform, and it's this idea of self-preservation. And this reinforces that they versus me idea, the individual versus the collective. And so people are in this situation, we can see people using theology, they're using religion as a way to create a community where it's very easy to control, and it's a community that it's very obvious when people are not conforming. And so it encourages this attitude of where everybody is watching and judging and encouraging everyone else to conform. And so it's very difficult for those characters who don't conform. And this is what we see in John Proctor. And in this next part of the scene, I'd like you to consider in this section here, and leading down to where Proctor gets quite forceful, I guess, with Hale. I want you to consider how you can tell that Hale is beginning to grow suspicious of the Proctors. So we're getting this sense, we're seeing this happening, but I want you to pinpoint what exactly is giving you that impression. Is it the stage directions? Is it the particular words that Hale uses? Is it the way that these words are structured through the sentences, the punctuation? What is it exactly that gives you that impression? So in this interaction here, Hale talks about how, these confessions surely are not nonsense. This is happening. This is all very, very much proof. And the way that Proctor talks, he's very direct. He uses really, I guess, simple language, but the language that really cuts to the heart of things. He doesn't talk around subjects. he's not evasive, he's not vague, he's very direct, and very, very dismissive of foolish things. So when he says, I never knew until tonight that the world has gone daft with this nonsense. Consider how many times John Proctor uses words like daft, crazy, mad. And so these words are all throughout this next part of the act. Those ideas are continually being peppered and to really indicate quite clearly how Proctor feels. And so this is quite hard for Proctor, because without him realizing it, in a sense, he is, I guess, going to cause his own downfall through these harsh, derisive comments. And we can see through the way that Hale responds when he says nonsense, and we have that exclamation there. Hale cannot believe that anyone will consider this issue, the idea of witchcraft, and this, for Hale, this reality. He is shocked that anyone would consider this to be nonsense, because so many people have put into their religion extra things that don't exist in the Bible. And so for these leaders of the church, they genuinely consider witchcraft linked with the devil, and therefore that is an issue to be addressed. And so it's all about, this is a godly thing that they are doing. They are doing the work of God. And so once you start saying things like that, it's very difficult for anyone to go against that, isn't it? And so we see here the hysteria that is building even more at this point. And so when John Proctor talks about the fact that, of course, they have confessed, if they must hang for denying it, and so he's picking out and the obvious flaws in this situation, and through his language, he's really emphasizing and exaggerating how ridiculous this is. There are them that will swear to anything before they'll hang. Because obviously there are people, where he says that they are them, okay, the way he's using that language doesn't include himself in that. You notice that? He has integrity. That's kind of what he's implying there. Anyone will confess to anything, so long as they will, save their lives. And this is, again, what I talked about in the previous section about self-preservation. And so through that rhetorical question, have you never thought of that? And I think he is using this as a rhetorical question to really point out that obvious criticism. And so think about the effect of rhetorical questions, and often they are used to point out the problem with something, to emphasize the stupidity of what someone said, or the bad behavior that has been demonstrated. You're emphasizing and criticizing, but it's not as direct as if you made just a declarative statement there. So this also demonstrates to us how naive Hale is. And this part here, also for me, I see that it's quite good for us to see Elizabeth having a voice as well, and that Proctor seems to be the one that takes charge and talks a lot and does get into trouble for things that he has said. So when he's saying, we've heard that you've said this, again, the rumours, and he says, I may have said it. So here he's having to face up to things that he may or may not have said in the past, and this seems to be a recurring thing for John Proctor. But at this point, we get to see Elizabeth speaking, and she, interestingly, is not afraid to be outspoken, to be frank, and to express herself. What we need to see is Elizabeth as the epitome of
of what the Puritans would consider to be the perfect wife. This scene is also demonstrating to us the goodness in Elizabeth, so that we can understand the ridiculousness of her being charged of witchcraft. So this scene is starting to indicate to us how much the false confessions are building, and they abound, and how the hysteria is building to the point where we then see that we can't believe that Elizabeth will be accused. But it's important for us to see Elizabeth's character before all these accusations are directed at her. We need to see her in this way. She's not afraid to express herself. She's very thoughtful, and she's very honest and frank. But she's also got to be very careful of her words. Everyone's trying to be very careful, except for John. He doesn't really care. Everyone else seems to be having to be quite careful in the way that they are talking. And so when Elizabeth says, "I cannot think the devil may own a woman's soul, Mr. Hale, when she keeps an upright way, as I have. I'm a good woman. I know it." So if it was when, so this is the qualifier that she's using there. And as the scene progresses, we can start to see how things are really getting out of control. So in this section, we're starting to see that really the workings of Abigail Williams. And then to increase the tension and the drama, when Giles arrives, we start to see more of this hysteria. Just a quick note about Hale's comment here. It's interesting that he seems to demonstrate, even though he's come to question them, and he's demonstrating some suspicion and doubt, it also seems to be that he is warning them. And we see here, I think, with Hale, he seems to be stuck. I find that he's starting to see the mistakes he's made, and starting to see that there's a real problem here. But he's also caught between those feelings and seeing that he's the one that's come in to sort out their witchcraft problem. And he's been the rock star that's been brought in to save the town. And so he's also, I guess, has to protect his own reputation and his authority and his power. But also he's starting to see that this is not what he thought it was. And I want you to note how quickly, particularly we're starting at this point, he starts to lose that power and authority, and things start to be taken out of his hands. We hear here that Rebecca is in jail, and when Hale he's very troubled by this news, and here he says, "If Rebecca Nurse be tainted, then nothing's left to stop the whole green world from burning." Things are really getting out of control. Rebecca Nurse is unimpeachable. She is the character that everyone respects, everyone holds in high esteem. And so now we're seeing that things are out of control. As soon as Rebecca Nurse is accused and in jail, not just accused, but she is in jail, then we know that things are getting bad. So he keeps, but Hale, interestingly, and this is what I find interesting, is that he keeps saying, let's just let justice, justice will happen. Justice will occur. Don't worry. Let you rest upon the justice of the court. He keeps repeating that. And this really indicates his naivety and the fact that he's so over his head in this situation. And why? Why does he keep doing this? And why is he constantly defending the court? Why do you think he does that? So here he keeps uplifting the justice system, and I guess we are getting a sense of that irony there. People are still afraid to discredit the accusers. So there's peddling so much fear here. He keeps thinking that, well, don't worry, justice will happen, justice will happen. But he's not really considering the fact that it's not going to happen because people are afraid to discredit the accusers. So the accusers have all the power. And if anyone who doubts the accusers, then suspicion is cast on them, not the accusers. And here, Hale says, "Nurse, though hearts break, we cannot flinch. These are new times, sir. There is a misty plot afoot, so subtle we should be criminal to cling to old respects and ancient friendships. I have seen too many frightful proofs in court." Okay, keeps going, referring to proofs. But here, I guess, for where it's actually indicating for me fear and hysteria. So this, for me, sums up the atmosphere of hysteria. Everyone is afraid to question the accusers, as I said just before, because that's going to mean that you're going to fall for the devil's tricks, because he keeps referring to the devil as being the problem. And so as soon as anyone accuses or doubts, then they are indicating that they are falling for the devil's tricks. Do you see that? So people feel that the consequences for doubting the accusations is more dire. So if you doubt the accusations, you are going to be in more trouble than if you just believed it. So it's creating an environment where these things will unfold. Reputation is conquered by paranoia. And this is where we see that reputation is now less important than following along and being caught up in that hysteria and that fear and that paranoia. So Hale is scared of the coerced confessions being the truth. And so because he's scared to think that the confessions would be coerced, they ignore any logical objections. So this is where we see the fear. And so through that biblical illusion of the devil, we have to think about what does Hale indicate to people, and what is he emphasizing here by referring to the devil. And he does it again in his next line. "Man, remember until an hour before the devil fell, God thought him beautiful in heaven." So here we have another biblical allusion, and I want you to see how both Hale and Paris cite biblical examples of someone who was thought to be virtuous has turned out to be evil. This gives leaders reason to mistrust even the most well-reputed citizen. So they keep referring to these examples to justify their responses. So through this example of saying, well, because there is this belief that the devil was an angel and the devil was in heaven, and the devil became the devil because he's kicked out of heaven. So this allows people to mistrust everyone. No one is I guess, impervious to sin. Even the most upright of us can fall. So see how that then allows anyone to be under suspicion. So it's interesting to see how these characters fall back on biblical truth, and they use what they see as biblical truth to justify their actions. And because it's the Bible, which they believe to be the word of God, if you question that, you are therefore questioning the word of God, you are questioning God himself. And remember, the Puritans didn't think that ordinary people were able to read, communicate and inspire the word of God. That was the job of the minister. So we have this sense that the minister has the ability to read and interpret the Bible. He has the power to do that, and you ordinary folk don't. So do what I say. In this part of the act, we now see that Elizabeth is going to be charged. Now we have 3 of the most respectable wives in the town charged. And it's interesting to see where Hale responds, I know nothing of it. Things are starting to happen without his authority now. And so people are somewhat aghast at this situation. And then Proctor is getting more and more agitated. And we can see that through when he says, on what proof? What proof? That repetition really emphasizes that there is no proof. What proof could you possibly bring that's going to prove something that is not true? So how can you tell that Cheever doesn't at first believe the charges against Elizabeth? What indicates that? And then when does that change? It's interesting also to note the way that Proctor talks. He's very commanding, and he says things like, she will not, and you'll leave her out of sight. Fetch Mary. See how the way that he talks, often with the imperative mood in the sentence structuring, to really indicate that leader role that he plays, and a lot of characters look to John to tell them what to do. What do we do? But more significantly, in this scene, we see the power of Abigail. Everyone underestimates Abigail's ambition and deviousness, particularly because of her status in society. She's fairly low status, and so no one thinks that she's smart enough to make this sort of thing up. She has power. Abby has become one of the most powerful people in Salem. So there's that irony there, is that she's one of the lowest people in town, and now she has become the most powerful because people don't expect her to be this clever. And part of the problem is that she can't go back now. She's gone this far, she has to keep continuing on. And in order to indicate to us how crazy the situation is, and to indicate to us how people are responding in that hysterical way, is also to see the language they're using. So, for example, when Cheever says calamity, look out for that heightened language. This tells us, giving us information that's happening off stage. So we hear Abigail, this is the story, this is the proof of Elizabeth being a witchcraft. So interestingly, Elizabeth's side of the story at this point is ignored. Everyone's heard this story. Abigail's testimony is it's much scarier and more dramatic. So everyone is going to believe this one. People are so easily believing these situations. So it's this, if we can see Arthur Miller's comment here, he is implying this situation about whoever has the more interesting, the more dramatic, the more intense and exciting story, that's what people are going to believe. And interestingly, when Cheever says, "'Tis hard proof," okay, this is ridiculous. absolutely ridiculous. And we can pick up through that dramatic irony, we can pick up what's happened, because later on when Mary says, oh, I was sewing this in court, Abigail was sitting next to me. And so we're now going, well, this is absolutely ridiculous. Abigail is so scheming and she is so clever and she understands how the people in this town think. And she's able to put all of this together. And so that people will believe anything. So what stage directions reveal to us Hale's true thoughts at this point? To have a look at those and start to track Hale's progress throughout these pages here. Let's move on. Okay, this is a really key moment in this act here. And this is quite symbolic and very important for John Proctor's character here when he rips up the warrant. So the warrant is the epitome of society's expectations. John's action foreshadows future conflict as well. And so here we can see this is Proctor as the tragic hero. He is challenging the absurd behaviour in the town through ripping up the warrant. This highlights for us John Proctor's character in the fact that he is taking a stand. And people's shock at what he does is very much indicated through the exclamatory language. They see his actions as unacceptable. But John's on a roll here. Okay, he rips up the warrant and then he starts ordering people around, not afraid to command those who are higher up. Okay, he's yelling at Cheever, who technically in their society is in a higher and more authoritative position, and he's telling them, get out of my house. He's absolutely disgusted by people, their friends, people who he thought had integrity and honesty and loyalty to come into his house and bring this warrant. He is disgusted. So here we have the hero who will challenge society. And this is John Proctor challenging society and not afraid of the consequences. Here we have him showing this courage, out of my house. And then the way that I love the way that he attacks Hale from this point until Hale's exit. And he says so Hale is trying to, I guess, persuade John to calm down, to realise the consequences of his actions. And Proctor turns to him and says, get you gone with them. Okay, them. You are a broken minister. I love that phrase. It is so true and cuts right to the core. And it also indicates that it's quite dramatic language being broken. Okay, it's physical. And so it'll be quite shocking to speak to the minister like that. And you can see how Hale responds to that and how he's taken aback by how direct John is being. And Hale says to him, Proctor, she's innocent, the court. So he's still believing in the court. And this is when, I can't help but get really frustrated. It's like, why is he defending the court so much? Why does he keep upholding the power and the justice of the court? And I think that's great, because I think Arthur Miller does that deliberately to make us feel frustrated, to make us see that there are some people who still cling on to these things despite the truth that is right in front of them. And at this point, we can see that John Proctor is incredibly frustrated. If she innocent? How can you say if? Of course she's innocent. Why do you never wonder if Paris be innocent or Abigail? Is the accuser always holy now? Were they born this morning as clean as God's fingers? I'll tell you what's walking Salem. Vengeance is walking Salem. We are what we always were in Salem, but now the little crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom, and common vengeance writes the law. This warrants vengeance. I'll not give my wife to vengeance. Notice the repetition of vengeance. Many accusations are clearly driven by revenge. The authority of accusations is reduced. Proctor, reduces that to pettiness. So he's really highlighting the problem in this town. He's showing us that the children who previously had no power, now they're testing their ability to provoke widespread chaos. John is the voice of reason, but no one listens. And it's also foreshadowing how this situation will continue to get worse and worse. The accused are denied fair opportunity to defend themselves, and the accusers are taken at their word. So this is the real problem, the real heart of the issue. And Proctor is so great at demonstrating the flaws, the problem, and I think Arthur Miller gives him all the best lines, particularly the one here where he refers to Hale as Pontius Pilate, another biblical allusion. Now, if you're not aware of who Pontius Pilate is, then you won't understand that reference. And it's another insult. So when the Jews had Jesus and they were wanting him to be killed, they had to go to the Roman authority for that to happen. They weren't allowed to do it on their own, and that was Pontius Pilate. And so they would appeal to him through, they had their own little hearing about how Jesus was a blasphemer and that he needs to be executed. And essentially, Pontius Pilate is like, I don't want to get involved in this. He hears Jesus speak and he understands who Jesus is, and he knows that Jesus is not who the Jews are claiming to be. And instead of saying, nah, you guys are crazy, I'm not going to let you execute anyone, he kind of bows to them. But not just that, but he sort of washes his hands of the situation and doesn't take any responsibility for his actions. Even though he has the power to stop this from happening, Pontius Pilate had the power to tell the Jews, the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, to just get lost. We're not executing anyone. He allows them to have what they want in killing Jesus, and he's like, I've got nothing to do with this. So this is that reference that Proctor is making. And so that is very significant. And that would have really cut Hale right to the heart, I think. Okay, let's move on. Lots of irony in this act. We can see the irony in the way that Abigail is referred to as a little girl. And the fact that Hale is asking Proctor to show charity in this situation. And here we have Hale making this little speech here. I just want to make a few comments about that. I want you to see the heightened language again and what he uses about when he says things like abomination and blasphemy. Whoop, missed that one. Blasphemy. The idea, and that idea about there's a secret blasphemy, there's something in this town. You've got to find out the problem in this town. This is why the devil's here, because there's something in this town that hasn't been uncovered and we have to uncover it. Help me to discover it. For there's your way, believe it. There is your only way. Okay, here we have this, through this comment, we're seeing Hale recognises John Proctor's individuality. Hale knows that John can help because he's an individual. So Hale thinks that if John and he work together, they can uncover the problem and resolve these issues. And he's still trying to go about it the wrong way. Hale does not really get, or he's not prepared to admit, the problem. He doesn't see it's the problem with the people's hearts. And John Proctor was very clear that this is the problem when he made that comment about we are what we always were in Salem. Okay, nothing has changed. People have not changed. This is how people are in this town. And it's now been brought out through these accusations, and Hale is not prepared to see that. And then we have Mary coming in, and we can see, well, through this interaction between Proctor and Mary, we just get this real sense of the fear of Abigail. And then we see also what Mary knows. She knows Abigail's plan. She says, Abigail charged lechery on you, Mr. Proctor. Okay, lechery is basically saying that he's a sexual predator. And so we see here Mary telling John Proctor, this is what Abigail's up to. We have the truth. Finally, it comes out. This is what Abigail plans to do. And so this is a really heightened moment. And when we listen to this scene and when we see it being performed, it's quite violent and physical. And this really shows us the fear, even despite the way that Proctor is treating Mary, she is still more afraid of Abigail. Now I want to draw your attention to John Proctor's lines here. He says, then her saintliness is done with, we will slide together into our pit. Notice the personal pronouns, and notice how he says good. Good, it is going to come out. It's almost like this sense of relief that that his affair with Abigail will come out now. And so he's saying it's almost this sense that if she reveals this truth, her saintliness, her status, the way that people are revering her in town as this as a saint because of all these accusations, she's going to undo herself. Through that plan, it will be her own undoing. We will slide together into our pit. Okay, so see how he sees, it's almost this fact that he will not allow himself to be forgiven for what he's done. There's no sense of redemption, no sense of forgiveness. He has sinned in his eyes, and he forever will be a sinner. And so we have this sense also that he's calmed by this, and he has a clear way forward, but he is determined. It's not about protecting himself and not about saving himself. It's about making sure that his wife, Elizabeth, will not die for him. And so he sees what Elizabeth is like, and he sees that she will probably do this. She probably will sacrifice herself for her husband, and she doesn't want him. She doesn't want her to do that. And in his last remarks, John Proctor says, make your peace with it. Now hell and heaven grapple on our backs. See the conflict between hell and heaven, those binary opposites. Grapple on our backs, and all our old pretense is ripped away. And I want you to follow along and see if you can pick up on the metaphor that he's using. I want you to pay attention to the personal pronouns and the imagery that he's creating here. We are only what we always were. See how he repeats that? But naked now. I naked, and the wind, God's icy wind, will blow. And this is a fantastic speech here. So first of all, when he says we are only what we always were but naked now, See how he includes himself in this. It's him and it's Abigail and it's the whole town. It's everyone. The reference to being naked and the idea of the clothes being ripped away, this is the idea of being exposed to God's icy wind. Clothing protects you, keeps you warm, and now that they're naked, they no longer have that protection. So the idea of clothing being symbolic of lies and secrets, so that allowed people to pretend to be something that they're not. Secrets and lies protected them and their reputation, and now they're vulnerable. So this is what we are seeing in these last remarks, and it's almost like it's a warning to everyone. And so this is an aside here, these comments. So John Proctor views the witch trials as an unveiling of the true nature of the people of Salem. I'm just going to write that down. Unveiling. No one has suddenly become vengeful and paranoid and unjust. They were always like this underneath a shallow layer of decorum. Okay, so we have this idea of the surface, appearances, is this sense of decorum, of proper behaviour. Proctor is burdened by his secret and his guilt. He sees himself as immoral, and in a way, he's believed that he's about to be exposed. So he sees himself as like, yes, now I'm going to be exposed too. I'm going to be exposed for the hypocrite that my sins, so he's going to be exposed for the hypocrite that he is. So his sins will stop eating him up. Okay, so he's almost like he's welcoming this. Okay, so a few comments to wrap up this act. We see John developing here, and it's developing his hero character. This act is used to concentrate John's character as an individual who challenged society. Mary represents the absurdity of society. Elizabeth. She's the first upstanding member of community to be accused, or one of the first, as we saw. All the previous ones were at the bottom of the social order. She demonstrates to us this idea of reputation versus hysteria and fear, and how they've come head to head in this act. Elizabeth still thinks that her good reputation will protect her. But we see how fear and hysteria becomes much stronger than protecting your reputation. Okay, so now that we've gone through this part of the act and we've finished Act 2, I want you to go back and write down what themes you noticed. And also, where can you see them? So if you haven't already done so, go back through the act and pinpoint at different moments, really key moments, key quotations, where characters enter or exit, or actions of those characters, what do they demonstrate about specific themes? Here are some themes for you to think about. So we know that there's a theme of hysteria, reputation, lies and secrets, guilt, reality versus appearances, courage and integrity, loyalty, vengeance, power and authority, fear and paranoia, collective versus the individual. So here are some that I've thought of. You can go back through this act and pinpoint where you see these ideas being explored by Arthur Miller. Where is he wanting you to think about these ideas. Then I'd like you to also think about the characters. Particularly, I want you to write down as annotations, what are we learning about these characters? How do they change? And what role do they play? I want you to think about that in particular with Proctor, Hale, Mary, and Abigail. What do we learn about these characters? How do they change or develop? What role do they play? And make those notes in your play or even just on some paper.